Good morning. Wow, it's really awesome to see this many faces here in this room. It's been a long time, and I know this isn't our first Sunday back, but this is definitely our most crowded Sunday back, and it's awesome to see that. I can't tell you how bizarre it was. If you didn't know, I'm a part of this band. I'm the lesser of the drummers. You saw the better drummer today. And it's really, really strange to play for just an online audience, and when we finish a song, it's just this. That's bizarre. So it's really cool to have you here, and I pray that you're here safely, and I hope that you're not here dangerously. I'm glad you're here. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to get into all that. So let me get back to where I am. Let me start here by saying, before you turn me off and say, "Who is this guy? What does he know?" The answer is, I really don't know much, and I was honored when Heath asked me to teach because I feel like, though, that the reason he asked me to teach is more because I'm not afraid of public speaking, and I am a teacher. I'm a middle school teacher, though. I'm not a biblical teacher. So I just want to reassure you that my research isn't my own, and what I'll be teaching today comes from 3 different sources who are all biblical scholars. First of all, there's a woman named Beth Moore. She's a teacher. She's a speaker. She is amazing. She wrote a book called Stepping Up. And I highly recommend you check it out. Matter of fact, it's a Bible study if you're looking for a new Bible study. It's called Stepping Up, and it looks into all of these songs of ascent. And that's the series we're working on, is the songs of ascent. Last week was the first Psalm 120. Today's going to be Psalm 121. And all of the songs of ascent are in this book called Stepping Up. My next resource, Pastor Matt Erickson of a church called Eastbrook, taught the same exact sermon that I'm teaching today, and I watched his sermon, and I took notes, and a lot of what I'm saying today, except for his personal experiences, I'm plugging in my personal experiences, but a lot of what I'm teaching today comes from him. You can watch his sermon, and you can compare the two, and you can call me a thief and a plagiarist later. That is from eastbrook.org. And then my third resource is a guy named Pastor Matt Whitman, and he is my favorite. If you don't have an online Bible study podcast that you watch or a Bible study YouTube channel that you watch, check out Matt Whitman. His channel is called the 10-Minute Bible Hour, and he gives daily podcasts that are about exactly 10 minutes. The longest one I ever listened to was 13 minutes, so they're great for commutes. And he has a weekly YouTube channel that goes longer and deeper. It's called the 10-Minute Bible Hour, and you should totally check it out. I love it. Okay, so whenever I'm saying something that sounds really, really smart, didn't come from me, it came from them, and I trust that their word came from God. And also, I obviously am going to be using the Bible as well. So, here we go. I served in the Marine Corps from 1993 to 1997, a long time ago, over, 25 years ago, depending on which year you're talking about. And in the Marine Corps, one of the things that they would have us do, and I was in the infantry, one of the things they would have us do is they would have us go on these long, long marches. We didn't call them marches, we called them humps, but I'll use the word marches here because I don't want to gross anybody out. So we call them marches. We'll call them marches here. And you can picture it in your head as soon as I say that, I'm sure. A soldier wearing camouflage pants, camouflage top, and wearing a combat vest. And on that combat vest, there would have been ammunition up in the chest area. Around the belt area, there would have been full canteens. And in the lower back here, there would have been a first aid kit. And then on top of that vest, they would have been wearing a pack. And that pack probably weighs at least 30, maybe even 50 pounds. And then you have to carry your weapon. If you're a machine gunner, you're carrying your heavy machine gun. If you're a mortarman, you're carrying your mortar tubes. So we're talking close to 100 pounds worth of gear. And these soldiers, what they would have us do is just march. Let's go. Let's see how far we can go. And the whole point is, as soon as you've made it to as far as you think you can go and you want to quit, okay, let's keep going. Push yourself even further, push yourself even further, push yourself even further. It's going to hurt, it's going to be terrible, but you're going to prove to yourself that you can do it and that you can do more than what you thought you could. Okay? And these marches weren't, I'm looking through my notes here, see what I forgot. I'm a West Coast Marine, by the way, and I say that because Jonathan Bass is in the background. He's an East Coast Marine, so... We had trails. I conquered a trail called the Grim Reaper. I conquered a trail called the Oven, which was like a slow burn on your legs. And I conquered a trail called the Microwave, which was like a all of a sudden your legs have just been nuked. Where I was stationed in 29 Palms, we had a trail cut into 3 sections called the Dragon's Head, and then the Dragon's Back, and then the Dragon's Tail. On these trails, you would feel the pain. You would have pain in your feet. You would have pain in your knees. You would have pain in your back. You would have dehydration. You would have headaches from all of the dehydration. And you wanted to quit. And then that's where the singing would come in. We called them cadences. And the whole point of these cadences was to get you to forget about your pain. Some of these cadences were patriotic. Some of these cadences were funny. Some of these cadences, I'll be honest, were just on the other side of inappropriate. And I won't teach you one of those today. But the whole point of these cadences was to get your mind off of the pain so that you can keep on going. And I'm a little bit nervous right here because I want to teach you a cadence. And I'm going to teach you a clean one, I promise. But with this many people in this room, I know I have a microphone on, but you need to be louder than me. And if you're watching at home, the only person you're going to freak out is your dog, so you have no excuse not to sing. I'm going to sing a line, you're going to sing it right back to me, the exact same line. It's only 4 lines long. Okay? Fingers crossed this will work. Ready? Here we go. Around her hair she wore a yellow ribbon.
Around her hair she wore a yellow ribbon.
She wore it in the springtime and the early month of May. And if you ask her why the heck she wore it, she wore it for that young Maureen so far, far away.
She wore it for that young Maureen so far away.
Awesome. Good job, you guys. Songs like that are what kept us going, and I promise you they worked. That song specifically I picked for this one because when I was marching, I pictured Terry. Terry and I were married when I was in the Marine Corps, and I could think about Terry, and I could forget about the pain in my knees, and I could forget about my 50-pound pack plus my full loaded magazines. These songs worked, I promise you. So let me get to the point. Before Jesus walked the earth, there were a group of Jewish people that lived in a city called Jericho. Jericho is in Israel, and if you can picture Israel in your head, Jericho is closer to the Dead Sea. At least 3 times a year, these Jewish people would have to travel to another city called Jerusalem, or they would have to hike. Now, I'm going to look at my notes, and I know it's, not professional to look straight at your notes during public speaking, but I don't want to screw up any of these details because I did some research here. From Jericho to Jerusalem, it is 15 miles in a straight line. But obviously, you and I both know that they weren't traveling on a straight line. There would have been switchbacks. They would have been going up and down hills. They would have been going around smaller mountains. So it's much more than 15 miles. Jericho is near the Dead Sea. The city of Jericho is 820 feet below sea level. Jerusalem is 2,800 feet above sea level. It's called the city on a hill. So therefore, if you think about it, obviously they're going to be going up and downhill, but the net profit is uphill. The entire journey is uphill. We're walking through a desert. On a nice day, it's going to be hot. On a terrible day, it's going to be scorching. There would have been thieves. There would have been robbers on the trail, on the path. And we're not talking about just the strong and athletic that went on these journeys, on these pilgrimages. There were elderly. There were young children. There were the pregnant. There were parents carrying their babies. The point here being, this is not an easy journey, and even though when I say it's 15 miles, it's maybe 2 or even 3 days of traveling. As they went on these journeys, they sang songs. The whole point of them singing these songs, just like the cadence I taught you, the whole point of them singing these songs is so that they could forget about their struggles, so that they could be distracted from the pain. It kept them motivated. It kept them encouraged. They were able to encourage each other. If I'm feeling good, but you're not feeling good, I can sing this song to you so that you can keep up with me. Okay? This is where my first slide is. That's where the parallel ends. The song that I sang to you, the song that we just learned, that song was the help. The songs that these travelers sang, the songs of ascent, these songs are pointing to the help. And that's the title of today's message. The series is about the song of ascent, but today is all about where does our help come from? And these songs are not the help. These songs are pointing to the help. All right, so last week, I practiced my message this morning. I was sitting over there in the office while the band was practicing, and I practiced my message, and it took me 32 minutes. And I feel like maybe that's a little bit too long if we don't have children's services downstairs. So I'm going to do some skipping, and this is one of the things I'm going to skip. But just real quick, I'm not going to review Heath's message like I was planning on, but it is online. If you haven't seen it yet, go to Level 13's YouTube channel and find his message, or it is on the Facebook page. Scroll through all of Level 13's posts, and you'll find last week's message. Heath taught it. But here's go ahead and put the slide up. This is these are two of the verses that Heath taught on last week. I call on the Lord in my distress, and he answers me. Save me, Lord, from lying lips and from deceitful tongues. This is one of the songs that they would have been singing. And that song has a lot more verses to it. But like I said, in order to cut things a little bit short, I decided to get rid of my review of Heath. So let's go straight to Psalm 121. This is the verse that we're going to dive into today. The first thing I want to do is just show you all of the verses, 1 through 8, back to back. And then we'll go back and we'll look at just 1 and 2. We'll look at just 3 and 4. We'll look at just 5 and 6. And we'll look at just 7 and 8. And we'll break it down piece by piece. But if this is meant to be one song, I think the first thing we should do is look at it all together as one song. So here we go. Go backwards a little bit, please. I lift my eyes to the mountains. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all harm. He will watch over your life. The Lord will watch over your coming and going, both now and forevermore. Psalms 121, 1 through 8. A couple of things I want you to notice right there. First of all, I forgot to bring it up at the beginning. All of the verses that I'm using today are in the Bible app. If you have your Bible, if you have a Bible app, it would be cool if you got it out. Once you're in the Bible app, just tap on More in the bottom right corner, and then tap on Events, and then find Level 13, and every verse that I'm using up on the screen will be on the Bible app. It's a cool, free app, and you should definitely check it out. A couple of things we should notice before we dig into each verse, each set of phrases individually is, first of all, it's only 8 verses long. It's a very short passage of the Bible, and I think that's on purpose because when you're trying to memorize songs, you don't want to have to memorize 40 lines. You memorize 8 or 10 lines, and then you can just keep on repeating them yourself on this journey. The second thing, and this is really cool, and this is one of those things that I wouldn't have noticed myself. I noticed it when I was doing my research. The first 2 lines, verses 1 and 2, are written in the first person, but then verses 3 through 8 are written in the second person. Verses 1 and 2, he says, I lift my eyes up. Where does my help come from? And then the rest of it uses words like you and your foot will not slip. And the reason that changes, again, this is from doing the research, this proves that this song is a liturgy, which is a fancy way of saying there would have been one priest who started the song. And then after you started the song, then it would go back and the rest of the crowd would join in. That's called a liturgy. All right. So I want to look at verses 1 and 2 right now. So Candy, if you could go back, please. There it is. Now we're going to break down each section. We're going to go 1 and 2, and then 3, and then 4, and 5, and 6, and then 7, and 8, and we'll be gone. So if you're trying to keep track of, gosh, how long he's been talking, we're on in 1 and 2. We're not halfway there, but you'll get there. I lift my eyes up to the heaven. Where does my help come from? My help comes from the Lord, the maker of the heaven and the earth. The first 2 lines are a question. The second 2 lines are the answer. It's a simple question, and those of us who have been I've raised in a church. I don't ever remember not going to a church. So if you're new to this whole church thing, I'm a little bit envious of you because you have a different perspective. I was always taught that God is our help, and when the question says, where does our help come from? My obvious answer is, well, gosh, it comes from God, and I actually have to think, But does it though? If I'm being honest, if we're being honest, when you're facing a challenge, is your first instinct to ask God for help, or is your first instinct to ask others for help, ask a friend for help? And if your instinct is to ask a friend for help, you know what? The Bible encourages that. Look at Proverbs 27:17. The Bible clearly says, as iron sharpens iron, so does one person should sharpen another. The Bible is telling you, yes, when you need help, it is right to ask others for help. But we need to go deeper than that, because now look at Romans 3:23. For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. If all you're doing when you need help is asking a friend for help, then you and your friend are going to fail. Now, don't get me wrong here. If you ask me for help, I'm honored that you asked me, and yes, my answer will be yes. I will help you, but if I'm not pointing the both of us towards God, then we are both going to fall. We are both going to fail. Let's move on. Oh, no, sorry. By the way, I'm going to be mentioning that I served in the Marines more than once. I know it's obnoxious, and I feel like Andy Bernard saying, oh, I went to Cornell. If you get that, that's great. If you don't get it, look it up. But that's when I'm talking about being in the Marines, I know I'm being obnoxious, but I want to make the point again. The cadence that we taught, the cadence was not the help. I'm sorry, yes, it was. The cadence was the help, but it was just a thing. Whatever or whoever you use to help you get through your challenge, whatever you use, whoever you use to get through your challenge, if it's not God, it's not going to last. Look at Psalm 27. And leave it up there for a little bit because I want to look at it more than once. Some trust in chariots and some trust in horses, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. I don't own a chariot and I don't own any horses. Maybe some of you, I don't think anybody in here maybe owns a chariot. I don't know everybody. Maybe somebody here owns a horse. We actually used to have some people that came to church that did own horses. So maybe this verse feels like it doesn't apply to you, but if we look at this verse again and get rid of the word chariot, get rid of the word horses, and just put the word stuff. Some trust in stuff, but we trust in the name of the Lord our God. And now all of a sudden this verse smacks me straight in the face, and hopefully it does you too. Some trust in stuff, but we trust in the Lord our God. That stuff isn't going to last. If that stuff is me, if you're trusting in me, gosh dang it, I don't want to, but I'm going to fail you. But hopefully I'll be able to help you. Point to the actual help. We're done with 1 and 2. Let's move on to 3 and 4. See, you're keeping track, right? Go ahead and put 3 and 4 up on the screen. He will not let your foot slip. He who watches over you will not slumber. Indeed, he who watches over Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. All 4 of these lines, well, 3 of these 4 lines are about sleeping. So let's look at them real quick here. These verses talk about things that are inevitably going to happen. When you are on a journey, when you're on a hike, when you're walking, yes, your feet are going to slip. Yes, you are going to need to rest. If your journey is more than one day long, you're going to have to take a break. You're going to have to rest. You're going to have to sleep. That's just human nature. But then the verse goes on to say, but not God. He will not sleep. He will not slumber. And when it says he won't let your foot slip, I think we have to look at that metaphorically and say, okay, we know that our feet are going to slip. That's inevitably going to happen, but God will be there with us. I even have it in my notes. Stop talking about being in the Marines, Andy Bernard. But I think it's important here to look at another Marine Corps metaphor here, and that is Marines as a unit never sleep all at once. We have this thing called Fire Watch, and I'm sure you've heard of it before, but a unit of Marines will take turns. 2 or 3 Marines will stay awake for an hour, and then they'll wake up 2 or 3 more Marines, and then they'll stay awake for an hour, and then 2 or 3 more Marines will wake up another 3, and then they'll stay awake for an hour. And as a unit, no one is asleep all at once. And therefore, even though your sleep was arrested, your sleep was broken because someone woke you up, when you are sleeping, you can rest assured. And you know that your camp, your unit is being guarded. and that you're safe. And if I was to sleep without a fire watch, I wouldn't sleep as restful as if I did with a fire watch, even though I had to wake up and be a part of that fire watch. Make sense? You smell what I'm cooking there? The same thing is true, except for God is our fire watch, and therefore we can rest all we need. God has our back. He is our fire watch. All right. Still on 3 and 4, but now it's important to look at this verse in historical context and in cultural context. And I'm a history teacher, so this is always my favorite part, when I get to look at the actual, how the original audience would have thought about this. I know what I think about these verses when I hear it, but what did it mean to the original audience all of these years, more than 2,000 years ago? Well, here's the thing. When these Jewish travelers were traveling on this road, they weren't the only people on this road. They had neighbors. And some of their neighbors were pagan, which is, or you could say they were polytheistic, which is a fancy way of saying they had lots of gods, more than one god. They might have God of the sun, God of the moon, God of the grass, God of the harvest, God of pregnant women, lots and lots of different gods. They also believed that these gods needed rest. The God of the harvest doesn't need to be working during planting season. The God of the sun doesn't need to be working at nighttime. And so these gods would take rests. They believed that some gods even hibernated. So I believe, and I'm not the only one who believes this, that these Jewish travelers were actually singing this song as a form of evangelism, and they were singing it loudly so that their pagan neighbors could hear. And they were saying, my God does not sleep. You have lots of little gods who, by the way, aren't even real, but if they were real, my God is more powerful than your little hibernating gods. My God is all powerful. I believe that this song is not just a reassurance for themselves, reassurance for themselves. I believe that this verse could be a form of evangelism for their pagan neighbors. Okay, verses 5 and 6. Look, we're chugging along. Let's put that one up. The Lord watches over you. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun will not harm you by day, nor the moon by night. That's a cool one. It's pretty easy to see why they would use the imagery of shade. Remember, they're marching through a desert. Not a lot of vegetation, hardly any trees at all. And if you were marching and you saw a tree, I keep saying marching, if you were traveling, and you saw a shade even a mile away, you could just barely see the shade, and you wanted to quit, just being able to see that shade could keep you going for another mile because, oh my gosh, that's going to feel so good when I get there. But this verse isn't saying keep going until you get to the shade. This verse is saying the Lord is your shade right now at your right hand, like you're carrying an umbrella with you. And you can take your shade whenever you need it. God is your shade. Now, if we move on to the moon part of that verse, if you're looking at the verse on your Bible app, the moon part is a little more confusing because I've never been scared of the moon. When I think of the moon, I think of nighttime, I think of cool breezes, I think of when Terry and I used to live in the desert. I think of, the nighttime is the best time, and the moon is out, and we can finally get out of our air-conditioned houses and go walk around when it's, just in the high 80s instead of over 100 degrees where we used to live. But so here we have to look at historical context again. Remember, not everyone in this area would have been Jewish and believed in the one true God. There was a lot of pagan people that believed in many different gods. There was a god of the sun, there was a god of the moon, according to those pagan neighbors. And once again, I believe that these Jewish travelers were using this song as another form of evangelism. And they were saying, I think this is the next slide. Yeah, there it is. If there is a God of the sun, which there isn't, then our God is more powerful. If there is a God of the moon, which there isn't, then our God is more powerful. Leave that up for a second, and you guys look at that, because to you and me, I don't know your life, but I don't believe in a God of the moon. I don't believe in a God of the sun, and I hope you don't either. If you do, I'm glad you're here, and I'm not trying to belittle you, but I don't. So most of us would look at this and say, well, yeah, no duh. But once again, we need to challenge ourselves to that's what it would have meant to them, but how can we use this to ourselves today? So let's go on here. Show me the next one. If there is a God of fill in the blank, get rid of the word sun, get rid of the word moon. If there is a God of fill in the blank, which, by the way, there isn't, then God is more powerful. What is that fill in the blank for you? You hear pastors talk about this all the time, and usually the pastors will talk about negative stuff. Are you bowing to pornography? Are you bowing to alcoholism? Are you bowing to greed? But it doesn't have to be bad things. You could put your family before God. You could put your job before God. You could put, I'm a member of this worship team, and there are some times when I've put this band or my talents before God. And they sound like good things, but they're not. So look at Exodus 23, because, this is the 10 commandments here, and this is commandment number 1. This is the first one. You shall have no other gods before me, Exodus 23. And he's not just talking about idols. He's not just talking about the God of the sun. He's not just talking about the God of the moon. He's talking about whatever it is that you put before God, that is what you are worshiping. So 7 and 8. Here we go. The last two, and then we'll wrap it up. The Lord will protect you from all evil. Look at the word protect and keep that in the back of your mind. He will keep your soul. Look at the word keep, and again, keep that in the back of your mind. The Lord will guard you. Now look at the word guard. So I've stopped on the word protect, keep, and guard. He will guard your going and your coming in from this time forth and forever. Okay. What does it mean to be kept by God? And I want to look at it this way. One of the coolest things my dad ever did for me, aside from naming me Thor, by the way, let's be honest, that's probably the coolest thing my dad ever did for me. But one of the coolest things my dad ever did for me, before I could even read, my dad got me a subscription. My dad got me a subscription to Mad Magazine and to Thor comics. So not only did he name me Thor, he got me a subscription to Thor comics. Before I could even read, I was already getting mail. Here's a little 2-year-old toddler walking around. Thor, you got mail today. That's a big deal, right? And so even before I could read, I'd be looking through these magazines, looking through these comic books, and oh my gosh, the artwork is amazing. Thor comics back then, they were drawn by Jack Kirby. Right? If you're a nerd, you're like, ooh, Jack Kirby. Mad Magazine, the artists were Jack Davis, Al Jaffe. He's one of the guys that would do the... if you've had a Mad Magazine, he's the one that puts the tiny little drawings in the margins. Dave Berg, Mort Drucker, my favorite Mad artist. The reason I know these names, even though, yes, I had to look at my notes because I'm nervous. The reason I know these names is because as a kid, I never threw any of my Mad magazines away. I never threw any of my Thor comics away. They stayed in boxes in my room. And every night to fall asleep, I would pick out a couple and I would flip through them. I would memorize the stories. I would admire the artwork. And every morning I would wake up and I would have Thor magazines and Mad magazines laying next to me in bed because I treasured these. And it was such a cool gift from my dad. So now think about how God treasures you. So much more than a kid who rips the pages. Whenever I tell that story, people always ask, will you still have them? Because they're probably worth a lot of money. I was a kid reading magazines. I did the fold-ins on the Mad magazines. I crumbled them up. I cut them out and put them on my wall, because to me that was treasuring. So no, I still don't have them. They're trash now. But God treasures you more than a kid who treasures his comic books. Look at Deuteronomy 7, verse 6. You are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples of the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possessions. God is crazy about you. God is in love with you. This is the creator of the heavens and the earth we're talking about. This is the omni everything. And you're his favorite. That's pretty amazing. It gave me goosebumps. I'm feeling good. All right, so let's look at the historical. I already said I'm a history teacher. I love looking at the historical context and the cultural context of this verse. So remember when I told you to remember the words keep, protect, and watch. The Lord will keep you. The Lord will protect you. The Lord will watch you. Well, in the original Hebrew of the Old Testament, all three of those words are the word shamar. Go ahead and put that up on the screen. The word shamar means to protect, to keep, to watch, to guard, ... because there's more. And I feel like the English translators of the version that I read to you purposely, okay, the Lord will shamar you, the Lord will shamar you, the Lord will shamar you. Okay, let's make one of them keep, let's make one of them protect, let's make one of them, and so on, because that way it's less boring. But even though, yes, it is less repetitive that way, I think it kind of loses something here, because when you are in the face of your biggest challenge and you feel like you're alone, doesn't it feel good to be repetitive to yourself? Look at this. Go ahead and put that up there. What if it said, the God will protect me, God will protect me, God will protect me, when you're facing the fire, when you're facing the challenge, when you're facing whatever it is that you don't think you can do, and you've already got pain in your knees and pain in your back and dehydration, and you want to quit, doesn't it feel reassuring to just repeat, God will protect me, God will protect me, God will protect me? So when you read this verse, it's okay to just, instead of saying God will keep me once, and then God will protect me once, and then God will watch over me once, just re-say it. God will protect me all three times, because it's still saying the same thing. It's all shamar. And when these travelers were singing this song, they sang it repetitively, because repetition like that is reassuring. It's like a blanket. It feels good. So there's all 8 verses. And now I think the most I almost said logistical, the most logical question that we should be asking, if you are a human being, which I trust that you are, I think the most logical question that you need to ask is, okay, so if God's protecting me, if the God is going to keep me, if God promises that he won't let me slip, then where is he right now? Because, man, I'm in a lot of pain. Has God broken the promises of Psalm 121? Short answer is no. Obviously, we're in church. My answer to that is going to be no. If you want to find the answer for the yes to that, then don't come here. But let's go deeper into it. Now, I want to talk about Matt Whitman. I told you he's my favorite online Bible study. One of the favorite things he says, for me anyway, when you're looking at the New Testament versus when you're looking at the Old Testament. The Old Testament is kind of like, right? Your natural answer to that is to do this, right? The Old Testament is setting up the New Testament. So the Old Testament is, and then here comes Jesus, right? So if we want to know the real answer to this, has God broken his promises, we need to look to what Jesus says, because he is the fulfillment of the promise. He's the fulfillment of shave and a haircut. Show me this verse from John. I have told you these things that so in me you may have peace. In this world you have... I want to stop there and slow that one down. I'm nervous and I'm reading too fast, so I'm slapping myself. Third line, in this world you will have trouble. But take heart, because I have overcome the world. That's Jesus talking to you before you were born. That's Jesus talking to you right now in 2020. In this world you will have trouble. But I have overcome the world. Jesus isn't saying now that you are a Christian, your life is going to be sweet. Think back to verse 121, when Psalms 121, when it says he won't let your feet stumble. That doesn't literally mean he's going to let you float through life and everything's going to be easy. He's saying you'll have trouble in this world. You'll have worldly troubles. I wrote something here. Let me find it. You will have worldly troubles. You will have worldly pain. You will experience worldly issues. But Jesus has overcome the world. Think about it this way. This verse can give you confidence. Look at 1 Corinthians. O death, where is your victory? Look at the confidence here of a human being saying this. The confidence. O death, where is your victory? O death, where is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God who gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Another way to look at this is when Jesus suffered on the cross, and he died on the cross, and he took your sin, he took my sin, and he suffered in hell for 3 days. And when he rose from the dead, he took the fangs from Satan. He took out Satan's fangs. Now, I don't know if Satan literally has fangs. We're talking metaphorically here, but think about this. Follow the metaphor. Now that Satan has no fangs, he's still going to gnaw on you, and it's still going to be annoying. But if you accept the gift that Jesus Christ gave you, then that's all it is. It's just a gnawing, and it's annoying. But Jesus has already won. He's already beaten Satan. So these worldly problems are just worldly problems. So here's the part that blew my mind. I've been excited to tell you this one thing. All this research I did for this message. And it turns out that this is an annual thing that these Jewish travelers would do, right? 3 times a year, travel from Jericho to Jerusalem and back. Jericho for years and years and years. And then my kids do it, and then their kids do it, and their kids. It's tradition. Which means, since Jesus was born to a Jewish family, Jesus was Jewish, Jesus did this traveling. The song that I'm teaching you today, Psalm 121, Jesus himself sang this song while on this trip. What must have been going through his mind when he sang this song? This song about how God will keep you, knowing that he himself is God in human form. One of the Trinity. Trilogy is a movie. Here's what I think was going through his mind, and I'm not the only one who wrote this. Like I said from the beginning, I've done my research. There are others who believe this, and I agree with it. I shouldn't say that this is my idea. When Jesus was singing Psalm 121, he was probably saying, these words that I'm singing are meant for them, for everyone around me, but only if I myself, Jesus, renounce these words. These words are not for me. That way, I can take their sin. I can die for their sins, and I can suffer in hell. They don't have to. I can suffer in hell for them. And then when I come back, then these words will always be for them. And all they have to do, all these people walking around me that barely even know me yet, all they have to do is accept the gift that I'm going to give them. That's amazing. I got goosebumps again. That's pretty awesome. So I'm almost done. I got one more story for you to kind of tie it in, and this is where I'm going to ask the band to come up. It's a story from the Old Testament, from Daniel, about 3 guys named Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. If you've heard the story before, if you have a kid who's between, 18 and 22, you probably know them better as Rack, Shack, and Benny, right, from VeggieTales. Or if you are between 18 and 22, you probably know them as Rack, Shack, and Benny from VeggieTales. But their real names are Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They deserve their own Sunday. I'm not going to tell you the whole story, but it is within 2 or 3 sentences. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were faithful to God, and that made the king mad, and the king wanted them to worship an idol. In the cartoon, it was a big chocolate bunny, right? And the king wanted them to worship an idol, and they refused to worship the idol, and the king said, okay, well, I'm going to throw you in the fire. And he ordered his soldiers to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire. And think back to what Jesus said, you're still going to have troubles in this world. God didn't save them from being thrown into the fire. They were thrown into the fire. But once they got into the fire, the king looked into the fire, and he saw a 4th being, a 4th entity into the fire with them. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego were not getting burned. And the king said, holy wow, there's something going on here, and maybe they were right to not worship my idol because their God is protecting them, and I wish it was my God too. Okay? I want to finish by reading those verses from the actual Bible, and I'm not going to close in prayer because this song is so closely tied to these verses. I want this song that the band is going to do. I want the song to be your prayer. So reflect on the verses that you're going to see, but then also when the band is playing the song, sing along with them and actually reflect on how God isn't going to stop you from getting thrown into the fire. Yes, you will have worldly problems, but if you are faithful to him, if you are loyal to him, he will protect you, he will keep you, he will shamar you. So let's look at these. Go ahead and put the verses up now. It's a little bit long, but it's worth it. Then Nebuchadnezzar was filled with wrath, and his facial expression was altered toward Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He answered by giving orders to heat the furnace 7 times more than it was usually heated. He commanded certain valiant warriors valiant warriors who were in his army, to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in order to cast them into the furnace of blazing fire. Then these men were tied up in their trousers, their coats, their caps, and their other clothes, and were cast into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire. For this reason, because the king's command was urgent and the furnace had been made extremely hot, the flame of the fire slew those men who carried up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. So the soldiers who put them in the fire were killed immediately. But these three men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell into the midst of the furnace of blazing fire, still tied up. Then Nebuchadnezzar, the king, was astounded and stood up in haste. He said to his high officials, "Was it not three men we cast bound into the midst of the fire?" They replied to the king, "Certainly, O king," he said. "Look, I see four men loosed and walking about in the midst of the fire without harm, and the appearance of the fourth is like a son of the gods." Then Nebuchadnezzar came near to the door of the furnace of blazing fire. He responded and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, come out, your servants of the Most High God, and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the midst of the fire.